this video, I'm going to be answering the question, who has abortions? We're going to look at data on who has abortions in the United States, and then we're going to expand and look at information about who has abortions globally. This data comes from 3 different surveys. They're compiling information here. They found that during the period of time that they were looking, the abortion rate declined for everybody. So if you're a person who thinks that abortion should decrease, good news. It's already decreasing on its own even before the Supreme Court. But especially for teenagers, for racial minorities, and for poor people, it has been decreasing for those 3 groups more than anybody else. However, the abortion rate is still highest for poor people. Being poor is the #1 predictor of whether or not a person will get abortion. So let's look at who has abortions most often. I'm going to give you the top categories in order from the people who are most likely to have abortion to the second most likely and then the third most likely. So looking at age, what we see is that people who are age 20 to 24 are most likely to have abortion. Then the next biggest age category is 25 to 29. Then our third age category is 18 to 19. Now, I don't know about you, I was taught a very different perspective. I was taught that abortions were for pregnant teen girls in trouble, and that's not really true. In fact, most of the people who are having abortions are the people who are in their early 20s or late 20s. That's the category that has abortions the most often. Now let's look at marital status. The group that has abortions most often is cohabitors. Cohabiting means that you're living together but you're not married. So cohabitors, so these are people who are in long-term relationships with somebody else that they're living with, but they aren't married. Then the next second largest category in terms of marital status, and keep in mind that this is almost half the number of abortions as cohabitors, is people who are previously married but are not currently cohabiting, so divorcees. And then our third highest category is never married and not cohabiting. All right, now let's look at race and ethnicity. White women have more abortions than anybody else in absolute numbers, but we're asking per 100,000 people. And what we see is that Blacks have the most abortions, then Hispanics have the second most abortions, and then others have the third most abortions. Probably this is because Black people tend to have a lot of these other contributing factors that we're going to talk about. So that's probably what's going on there. Immigration status. They only had 2 categories here, so I'm going to tell you about both of those. Native born had 15 abortions out of 100,000, whereas immigrants had 14 abortions out of 100,000. So native born people are more likely to have abortions than immigrants, but not significantly more likely. It's just a small effect. If you look at education, the category that's most likely to have abortions are people with a high school diploma or a GED. Then next, second most likely to have abortions are people who have some college. And then third most likely are people who have less than a high school degree. Now let's look at that person's family situation. Do they have other kids? And what we see is that 22 out of 1,000 women who have abortions have 1 previous birth, so they already have a child. Then 13 out of 1,000 women who have abortions have 2 or more previous births, so they have 2 or more children. And 13 out of 1,000 have 0 previous births. So we're kind of painting a picture here of someone who is probably in their early 20s, probably doesn't have a college degree, and already has at least 1 child. That's going to be the most common scenario. Now let's look at income. And income is the strongest predictor of who has abortions by a long shot. We see that living in poverty is by far the #1 predictor of having an abortion. It is the strongest predictor. It is stronger than education level. It's stronger than having other kids. It's stronger than your immigration status or your race or your marital status or your age. The number one predictor of who has abortions is these are people who are living in poverty. Then the second highest category for having abortions is living somewhere between the poverty line and twice the poverty line. So these are still going to be poor people, but not quite below the poverty line. And then the group of people who make 2 times the poverty line or more are people who are very unlikely to have abortions. So this is painting a picture for us that people have abortions when they are poor, when they can't afford a child. There's other research that backs that up, but just looking at the statistics here, it's pretty obvious that's what's going on. Now let's look at the information worldwide. So this study includes information about abortion both in places where abortion is legal and places where abortion is illegal. In places where abortion is illegal, of course, there isn't good government data on how many people are having abortions, so instead they have to actually estimate. But they used estimation techniques that have been proven by other social scientists to be good estimation techniques, where scientists tried at first to estimate the number of abortions, and then they went back later and checked to find out exactly how many abortions actually did happen, and their estimates were very close to the reality. So here's what they did. They gathered information on abortion in every country or territory that they could, and they adjusted for underreporting based on published studies that prove when abortion is more likely to be underreported or not. Here's what they found. In 2008, they found that the global abortion rate is 28 abortions per 1,000 women per year, and that was for women ages 15 to 44. They found that the abortion rate declined a lot from 1995. In 1995, the abortion rate was 35 per 1,000, but by 2008, it was only 28 per 1,000. So the abortion rate is declining. The decline cannot be explained by the fact that there are fewer young women. They did not find that that was true. So that's not what's going on. It's not that there are fewer young women, it's that these younger women are having fewer abortions. Then they gave us data about unsafe abortions. What they found was that 49% of abortions globally are unsafe. This is a very scary statistic to think that almost half of all abortions globally are not safe. They found that in Africa, 97% of abortions are unsafe. People are not getting the proper medical care when they're having abortions. You can contrast that with Europe, where only 9% of abortions are unsafe, and even those 9% of unsafe abortions almost always happened in Eastern Europe, not Western Europe. So if you combine Eastern and Western Europe, you get a percentage of 9% of abortions unsafe. But in Western Europe, that number would be even lower. So you can see a huge disparity, huge inequality globally, where some people have access to safe abortions and people on other continents just don't have access to safe abortions. They found that 21% of pregnancies end in abortion in 2008. This is one of the more up-to-date numbers that I could find. They found that abortions happen in every country, even the countries that have the strictest laws against abortion, even the countries where people go to jail if they are proven to have had an abortion. Abortions still happen. In fact, they actually found an inverse relationship between the laws about abortion and how much abortion happened. They actually found the more liberal the abortion law, the fewer abortions. What they mean by that is the more open and accepting of abortion the country is, the fewer abortions happen. In contrast, the stricter the abortion law, the more abortions. Now, these authors were careful to point out that this is not that people are having more abortions because the law is strict, or they're having fewer abortions because the law is more lenient. Instead, what's happening is contraception, birth control. In the countries that have kinder abortion laws that allow people to get abortions more easily, those are also the countries that provide contraception more easily. And conversely, in the countries that have stricter abortion laws, those are also going to be the countries that make it difficult to get contraception, that make it difficult to get birth control. So, what's actually happening here is a relationship between birth control and the number of abortions. The easier birth control is to get, the fewer the number of abortions. But even though that relationship between the strictness of the law and the number of abortions is not a real relationship, it's just a side effect of how easy it is to access contraception. So it's just a side effect. But that does prove that you cannot get rid of abortion by making abortion laws strict. The countries that have the strictest abortion laws also have the most abortions. So making abortion illegal is not going to get rid of abortion. It just doesn't work that way. In some cases, when you make something illegal, it does decrease the behavior dramatically. But in the case of abortion, it doesn't. So making abortion illegal in the United States or in specific states, as we're seeing right now, is actually not going to decrease abortion the way that some people are hoping that it will. Also, this study found that the more liberal the abortion law is, the safer women's health is. They were able to find direct correlations between the percentage of people who are safe during pregnancy, not dying, not having serious health effects, and abortion law, which makes sense. We know that a percentage of abortions are happening because people are aborting fetuses that will harm their health. So it makes sense that abortion is healthcare. And if you aren't providing that healthcare to people, then people are going to be less safe and less healthy when they're denied that healthcare.